Jerry Jones promised that the Cowboys would be active before the trade deadline. He wasn't lying. We'll get into that next.
You are Locked On Cowboys, your daily Dallas Cowboys podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back to the Locked On Cowboys podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. We'd like to thank you for making us your first listen of the day. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers can bet just $5, and if your bet wins, you'll get $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. Welcome back. I am your host, Marcus Mosher. He is Landon McCool. And on today's show, we're talking about the two big trades. Well, one of them was a big trade that the Cowboys made on Tuesday. Landon, let's start with the Quinnen Williams one. The Cowboys trade a 2026 second-round pick, a 2027 first-round pick, and Mazi Smith for Quinnen Williams, the all-pro defensive tackle for the Jets. We talked about him in our preview show on Friday. What do you think now that the deal is completed?
Yeah, I mean it's the big swing that we were hoping for at the trade deadline, and I think we talked about the fact that even before the Cowboys had lost that Cardinals game, that the Cowboys, if they were going to make trades, they needed to make trades that were more than just rentals, right? That weren't just going to be coming in here on a 2026 deal, a prove-it deal, or a rental situation. You needed guys that had multiple years left on their contract, guys that you can kind of start to build the defense around. And I think Quinnen Williams fits the bill perfectly, right? He's got this year and another 2 years on top of that. And I think you've kind of more than solidified now the defensive tackle spot. In fact, you may have kind of more than you know what to do with at this point, but that will be able to sort itself out. But I think the key thing here is that you've got a guy that is a playmaker on your defense that you can rely on. I think that's obviously not a position specifically, but a role that has been very much missing since the Micah Parsons trade. So it's good to get a guy out in there that you feel like, if you need him to, can be a dominant force at certain points during the game.
We're going to talk about the compensation here in a little bit, but I want it just to focus on the player, because I'm sure there are some listeners that remember him from the draft cycle, or remember them when the Cowboys played them earlier in the year or in previous seasons. But this is a bona fide playmaker and star. And I know he's not of the like Myles Garrett, Micah Parsons level, but for a defensive tackle, it's about as good as you can get, because there's just so few defensive tackles, not only in the NFL right now, but if you look over like the last 5 years, that can rush the passer and stop the run at a high level. And it's really like Aaron Donald, Chris Jones, Dexter Lawrence, and that's basically the list. And that's, again, from the start of the 2020 season, he is one of those guys. Like, he is routinely one of the highest graded run defenders. He's a fantastic pass rusher. In fact, he's PFF's #1 graded run defender through the first 9 weeks of the season. He can do both at an incredible level. He can play the 1 technique. He can play the 3 technique. That's his better spot. But this is a cornerstone player, Landon, that you can build an entire defense around. And the other part of this is these guys are very rare to find. Like, you could have the #3 pick in this year's draft and not get a player of Quinnen Williams' talent and ability. They just don't become available. They don't pop up in these drafts very often. Guys like a Jalen Carter, who went 9th overall, he's not, at his peak, he's still not as good as what Quinnen Williams is. This isn't like the Cowboys trading for Kenny Clark. Like, this is Kenny Clark in his prime can't hold a candle to Quinnen Williams. That's what type of player you are getting here.
Yeah, I mean, I think you said it. Like, you could build your defense around a player like this, and I think that's the plan, right? Is that they needed serious juice at the position. Look, I think the downside here has been that you kind of have a couple of bodies that you spent money on that are very similar to this, but that doesn't mean that you can't leverage all these guys and the tiers above those other 2 guys that Quinnen Williams exists in is it's pretty high and it's pretty lonely, right? There just aren't that many defensive tackles that are able to have a balanced dominating game like the way Quinnen Williams does. And it just it changes the angles along the defensive line in a way that is going to move the needle. And now look, that as we've talked about this, the Cowboys' defensive problems are comprehensive. They are front to back and all the spots in between. So this is not a solve for the Cowboys defense overall, but I think this is a very, very solid first step towards correcting the issues that you have on defense by having a dominating playmaker in the middle of your defense. It certainly makes all the lives easier of the 10 other guys around him. And then as you start to kind of swap out other components, the incremental growth will get there. But at least you have a guy that can kind of be the focal point of this defense, something that you can kind of build around. Micah Parsons, he's not on Micah Parsons' level,
No.
but he is the same in the sense that he can be the guy that stirs the drink, right? And then you can build out from there.
Now we should talk about some of the pass rush numbers because they've declined over the last couple of years, and I'm not exactly sure why. He looks as explosive as ever. It could be a system thing. It could be as simple as he's playing a lot of snaps, a lot of run snaps on some early downs because the Jets just haven't had a lot of leads in these games. So you're not getting into these obvious passing situations, and that can really hurt some of these pass rushers. We'll see if the Cowboys can get into some of these. We know the Cowboys offense can be really good in spurts. So if they can ever get into some of these positive, games, scripts, maybe that's where we see Quinnen Williams play better. But it's not like he's been a player that hasn't been impactful. Like I said, he's the highest graded run defender in the NFL. So we talk about someone like Micah Parsons or maybe Trey Hendrickson, who they were talking about trading for. Hendrickson is a bad run defender. Micah Parsons can be an up and down run defender. This is somebody that can have an impact on every single play.
Yeah, and again, just a defensive tackle, like you said, a rare kind of body type that you don't get a ton of. There's an opportunity cost here, like you mentioned, right? It's because these guys don't become available regularly, and trying to find a guy like this can be more difficult than just having a first round pick, right? Like these guys don't come out every year. And Quinnen Williams has been a solid to extremely good defender the entirety of his NFL career, and has been very consistent, which is also an issue that you have with defensive linemen at certain points.
One other note that I wanted to make on Quinnen Williams is that these defensive tackles, and it's like once you get to a certain level of defensive tackle, it seems like they can just play forever. So he's 27. He'll turn 28 here in December. So that means that you have him under contract through his 28, 29, and 30 seasons. Look at your top defensive tackles in the league right now. It's Chris Jones, who I think is going to be 32 at some point this year. You've got Cam Hayward, who I think is 36. Calais Campbell on Monday Night Football, who's almost 40, had 2 sacks. Like these guys play a long time. And because of Williams' ability to play both as a run defender and as a pass rusher, he's got power, he's got quickness, he's got hand technique. I think his game is going to age very, very well.
Yeah, and it hasn't aged poorly at this point so
No.
far. So I mean, it doesn't look like he's taking a step back or anything like that. Yeah, you're getting him age wise, right, kind of in the prime of his career for a defensive tackle. So yeah, a good trade for a player that is a extremely good, all pro, borderline all pro level player. That you hope that you can get in here, have him have some success. Look, he was unhappy in New York. Like that's coming out a lot now. Is that he just didn't want to go through another rebuild after the Rodgers stuff. So he's motivated to come in here and win now and try to find a way. And that's what you're hoping to kind of build towards in the 2026 season.
And not only that, there was a report from Connor Rogers, who covers the Jets, that he's been asking for a trade for a couple of weeks, and the Cowboys were his preferred destination. Like that's where he wanted to go, whether that's because he wanted to play, in Dallas, whether he wanted to play with Aaron Whitecott and the Cowboys' current defensive line coach. Who knows the reason? But generally, when these guys get to destinations where they want to play, you usually see an uptick in production and effort level. I would assume that we're going to get that.
Yeah, I agree. And it's going to be interesting to see. It's a guy that's coming here motivated in the prime of his career, and a guy that, like I said, you feel like you can have a starting piece and then figure out how you want to work the rest of the defense around him. At least you have something in place now.
Yeah, let's talk about the trade compensation and a couple other little details about the Cowboys trading for Quinnen Williams. We will get to that next. This episode is brought to you by Built. Nobody likes paying rent, but if you must, you might as well get something for it. That is where Built comes in. Built is changing the game by turning your rent payment into real rewards that you can actually use. When you pay through Built, you can earn flexible points that can be redeemed toward hundreds of hotels and airlines, a future rent payment, or your next Lyft ride. But Built isn't just about rent. It's about rewarding you around your entire neighborhood. What I love about Built is that your rent finally works for you. You're earning points every month on something that you already pay. And Built has made everyday life feel just a little bit more rewarding, from your neighborhood to your travel plans. Turn your rent into rewards and start earning points around your neighborhood by going to joinbuilt.com/LockedOnNFL. That is joinbilt.com/LockedOnNFL, and make sure to use the link so they know that we sent you. Welcome back to the Locked On Cowboys podcast. We'd like to thank you for making us your first listen of the day. I was thinking, Landon, today, when is the last time the Cowboys have had a defensive lineman of this talent and caliber? It's got to be like the first name that came to my mind was like Leroy Glover, but even Glover was a little past his prime at that point. Has there been anybody since then that I'm missing?
I think there was like 3 games of David Irving that were
yes,
pretty interesting.
That's the right answer. Honestly, it's probably David Irving.
Yeah, I mean, other Jay Ratliff is the only other guy that I can kind of come up with, and even at his best, I don't know that he was anywhere close to where we're talking about with Quinnen Williams.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's been a long time since the Cowboys have had a defensive tackle of this ilk, I would say, for sure.
All right, so let's talk about the compensation, because I think this is where the conversation gets a little nuanced and layered. And unfortunately, like, Twitter is not the best place to have this conversation. We just got done outlining all the reasons why we love Quinnen Williams and why we think he's going to be a good fit for the Cowboys in the short term and the long term. Let's talk about the compensation. They trade a 2026 second round pick, which right now, with where the Cowboys are drafting, that would be about pick 45, 46. And then they trade a 2027 first round pick, and that is the better of the 2 picks between the Cowboys and the Packers. Is it a lot to give up for Quinnen Williams? Yes, it is. It's probably more than I would have been willing to give up. Does that make it a bad trade for the Cowboys? I don't think so, because you needed a guy like Quinnen Williams. It is a hefty price tag, but great players require big time prices.
Yeah, and honestly, I think I'm okay with the compensation, because first of all, to get them to take the 2027 first round pick, I think was huge, right? Because ultimately, to me, I'm still holding that as that's a second round pick. Like, I understand that it's a first round pick and you're getting the better of the 2, but whenever you trade next year's first round pick in the draft, which is, several months from now, which is, 6 months from now, you always value the next year's first round picks as second round picks, and a grade down just for, tax or whatever. I tend to think that if that's the case, we discussed this when we talked about Quinnen Williams. I don't know if it was during our trade show or if it just was previous to that, but at some point we discussed the fact that the kind of rumored price that was floating around was second round pick. Then we thought that was absolutely ridiculous, and that we would have run up to it. And I said then that I think a first round pick absolutely would have been worth it. For them to give up a 2027 first round pick, a second round pick this year, and then Mazi Smith, who is a guy that, they're looking to offload anyways.
They save money by trading Mazi. That's honestly, that's not an asset that the Cowboys are trading away. That's actually more of a contract dump, because I think the Cowboys save like $3 million by offloading him.
So, ultimately at the end of the day, I think it's probably, the equivalent to me as a first round pick this year, like with all things considered. And for all the things that we discussed in the first segment, I'm totally on board with it, because you're still getting a player in the window that you're trying to build towards. You're not trading a first round pick for a rental. Like we said, this is a guy that you can build your defense around. And I'll also add, for as much hand wringing as there has been about the Cowboys' selection of defensive players in the draft, I don't understand why some of those same folks would be upset when you're trading for a known commodity here with the opportunity to kind of build on a relationship there. So, I certainly can understand folks that don't like the trade compensation or that do like the trade compensation. I think where I have problems with are people that are the outliers that are going to the extremes, like giving this grade an F or saying that the Cowboys totally fleeced the Jets. Like, I think this was a solid, valued deal. We can argue about who got more value on the side or the other. But to me, if you consider all the things and considering where the Cowboys are and what they were looking for and the opportunity cost to get a defensive tackle like this, I think this all came out in the wash to me.
I think the people that are believing that this move is to keep the Cowboys competitive this year are looking at the trade wrong. Could Quinnen Williams make the Cowboys better this year? Yeah, I expect them to. Like, I expect this to upgrade their defense. Is it going to push them to the playoffs? No. And I don't think the Cowboys are being dumb about that. I think they know they're not one player away from being a playoff team this year. But you're seeing that a lot from the national media. Like, yeah, the Cowboys aren't better than the Rams or the Eagles or some of these other teams right now. But I think they're looking at a window, right? This is where it's important to try to figure out where your window is at. And everything that we've seen suggests that it's that 26 and 27 seasons, because that's when you have Dak Prescott under contract. CeeDee Lamb is under contract. We think George Pickens could potentially be franchise tagged. Your offensive line outside of Tyler Smith is all on rookie contracts. I think they're going to be moving on from Terrence Steele. You'll still have 3 first-round picks to use during that window. You have all your allotment of picks in 2027. This is a move to help you in those 2 years as much as it is to help you right now.
Yeah, and again, I think what's the position that you probably weren't going to be able to get due to opportunity cost is a more dominant defensive tackle. I understand you spent here. I understand you have Osa Digizua, but having these two together is going to be a force multiplier in the middle of your defense. It's going to help the guys on the outside, including Ezraku as he develops. And now you're not having to play a high wire act of drafting a talented defensive interior player who notoriously take forever to develop as well, right?
Let's attach a name to it. Peter Woods is the top defensive tackle in this year's class from Clemson.
Yep.
If the Cowboys were to get him at pick 10, I think you'd be feeling really great about it. There is no way, and I like Peter Woods. There's no way Peter Woods is going to outperform Quinnen Williams in 2026 and 2027. And those are the years the Cowboys need to get good production from their first-round picks. I think that's why you're likely to see them use these picks on positions that can play faster, whether that's like a safety, maybe you'll add another edge rusher, a linebacker. They needed somebody that could come in and be a cornerstone right now at a position that is notorious for having a really high bust rate and taking a long time to develop.
Yeah, and again, like this wasn't. I want to be clear because this just came out with Shadi. He just as we're recording is giving his press conference, and this wasn't the deal that Jerry was referencing yesterday as being a done deal. So this wasn't a deal that the Cowboys kind of ham-fisted through despite losing the game. Like this is a deal that they had in mind for the long term, right? Like this for the long term in the NFL being 2 to 3 years, right? Like this was a plan that the Cowboys had in mind to kind of bolster the coming years, not like a last minute, try to save the season type move. So this was part of a grand scheme to use these picks that you got from Parsons trade and try to develop the other side of the ball that is really obviously lagging behind your offense.
One more thing that I think is going to be fascinating here. So I believe it's $8 million this year for Quinnen Williams, 21.7 in 2026, 25.5 in 2027. Honestly, both those years are fine. Like that is right where his value lines up. And honestly, you're probably getting a little bit of a deal. I think next year's the only year that has guaranteed money attached, and I'm going to have to double check on that. But one of the reasons why Quinnen Williams was a little frustrated with the Jets is he wanted a new deal with some new money. And that's one thing I'm going to have to see what the Cowboys do. Like, how do they navigate that? Do they tack on a couple more years, give him more money up front to lower those cap numbers? I don't know. But now that you've traded so much, you you kind of have to do something because Quinnen Williams holds all that leverage. I wouldn't be shocked if we see the Cowboys cut Kenny Clark this offseason, give Quinnen Williams an extension, and then try to fill in the rest of the defensive line with cheaper contracts.
Yeah, and it makes sense. I mean, you've got a rookie pass rusher that you feel like is coming on a little bit. He's going to be on his deal for another 3 years beyond this year. So, yeah, I think you go target players where it's hard to develop those players quickly, right? Defensive tackles, one of those. And then you can fill in the rest with young upside talent that can grow with you as you go.
All right, let's talk about the other trade that the Cowboys made on Tuesday. We'll talk about Logan Wilson, the Cowboys' new linebacker, next. This episode is brought to you by FanDuel. The NBA is back, and there is no better place to get in on the action than FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. Even if you missed the start of the game or you just want to ride the hot hand, FanDuel has live bets on everything from who will score the next bucket to fourth quarter comebacks. Plus, you can even combine your live bets into a same-game parlay for a shot at a bigger payout. It keeps every game exciting, especially when your team's making that late game push. And right now, FanDuel is giving new customers $300 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. So head over to FanDuel.com and sign up and play your game with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. Welcome back to the Locked On Cowboys podcast. We'd like to thank you for making us your first listen of the day. For your second listen, check out the Locked On NFL podcast, 2 shows every single day, 1 in the morning with Tyler Rowland, 1 in the afternoon with Tony Wiggins, available wherever you get your podcasts. All right, the other move that the Cowboys made early on Tuesday morning, they traded for Bengals linebacker Logan Wilson. They gave up a 7th-round pick, and they assumed some of his salary for this year. I think it was like $2.5 million or something like that. He has 2 more years under contract. He was a healthy scratch last week against the Bears. What do you make of this trade now, especially after what you know about the Quinnen Williams move?
Well, it's interesting that this was the trade that Jerry was talking about yesterday because it's not much of a needle. I mean, it's not a needle mover. I mean, you're basically getting the player for nothing, 7th-round pick, right? I mean, this is a situation where the Bengals had a surplus at the position. They weren't going to re-sign Logan Wilson. I mean, he still has another 2 years left. And I think they liked the players that they had underneath him, and they wanted to start playing them more. For the Cowboys, it's a veteran linebacker who you feel like is a probably more athletic, even now, a more athletic version of like Jack Sanborn. Right. And the hope is that you're incrementally improving your defense. At least, this to me is not necessarily this. How do I phrase this? This to me is a deal that's done more for this season than Quinnen Williams deal is, right? I think the Logan Wilson trade to me is about providing a floor for your linebacking crew, right?
Because watching that tape from Monday night, the linebackers played so bad that it's even hard to evaluate your defense. Yeah, absolutely. And I think that if you can, solidify the front 7 a little bit, look, we'll talk about it. Maybe that's what we should do now, right? Like you bring in Logan Wilson, right? And if he could just give you a little bit more of a floor in the linebacker crew, right? You've got Overshown coming back, even if you're not like, let's assume the minimum for Overshown, even if you've got Overshown coming back in and playing 20 snaps a game or something like that early on. Now, at least you've raised the floor a little bit on the linebacker crew because you've got Logan Wilson as part of that rotation. Maybe he can give you some more solid looks as he's kind of working himself in. Overshown's coming in. It just less snaps for guys like Murray and Shamar James at this point. Like he's just not playing fantastic. So I think too much for him to be a full-time
it's overexposure. Is what it is, right? The problem is that I think Murray is just Murray, right? And Shamar James, I think he's just playing too much. Like he needs to play like 10 to 15 snaps, then get off the field, kind of digest it. I think after that, he starts getting exposed a little bit. So you got those guys coming back, and then you start, talking yourself up with Revel and some of these other folks coming back. So I think for me, they wanted to kind of get to a spot where their front seven floor was just raised enough that it's not putrid. And now, okay, they still have to deal with the incredibly hurt and untalented secondary, but at least you've got like a clear target, right? And it's not just every position needs a floor raiser. Now you hopefully can find some stability on your second level. You've made some improvements on the first level. Now it's about trying to find ways to hide what's going on in the third level of your defense.
I have issues with Logan Wilson's tackling. I think the athleticism is starting to wane, but at least he knows where to be.
Yeah.
And I don't know if I could say that about any other linebacker on this team right now. And honestly, that's like you watch that tape, and a lot of times the defensive tackle was getting great penetration, and the linebackers were nowhere to be found. And that's kind of the issue here. It's a 8-game look-see, right? It costs you $2.5 million. If he looks completely washed and it's not a good fit in your system, you cut him and you move on. If Shamar James and DeMarvion Overshown looked great in the second half of the season, you cut him and move on. If he works out and it's, hey, this is a guy that could be either a starter or a good rotational guy, and it's $6 million for next year, maybe that's a little bit more than you'd be willing to pay. But hey, it's an NFL linebacker that's played in a lot of big games. That's okay as well. I'm never going to get mad about a trade where you you get somebody for a seventh round pick and there's no guaranteed money left in the deal. Like, it's just not worth it.
Yeah, and again, I think it's a situation where they had players that they wanted to start getting look at. They wanted to look at Carter. They wanted to look at Knight, and I think for the Cowboys, it's a guy that can come in and maybe you can help kind of cover up his flaws a little bit by playing him more as a Mike linebacker, and because you're just not going to need him at will. You're going to have Overshown coming back. You've got Shamar James. You really need him to kind of function as a heady green dot between the tackles tackler. And I feel like he still has the athleticism to handle that role. He clearly has the know-how. I mean, he's almost the inverse Kyler Murray, right? Where he's like not as an incredible athlete, not an explosive guy.
Kyler or Kenneth Murray?
Oh, yeah, man, sorry. Yeah. Well, certainly both, honestly. But yes, Kenneth Murray. He's like the inverse Kenneth Murray, right? Where it's like he's not explosive. He's not necessarily a big hitter guy, but he's a guy that is smart. He knows where he's going to be. He's not going to overrun plays, whether he can overrun plays or not, but he's not going to, he's going to make the tackle, when he gets there for the most part. It's been up and down a little bit this year, but you could say the same thing about Kenneth Murray as well. And maybe even Kyler Murray if on interceptions that he's thrown.
All right, that is it for today's show. We want to thank you for making Locked On Cowboys your first listen every single day. Check out the channel on YouTube, download the podcast, wherever you get your podcasts. We are free and available on all platforms. Follow Landon on Twitter at McCoolBCB. I'm at Marcus _Mosher, and we will see you right back here tomorrow.